Just a warning, this is a conversation between adults and it uses some adult language.
I was shocked that in the nation's parliament that one of the most frequent tools used to try and shut me down was sexist slurs and put-downs.
From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Friedman and you're listening to No Filter, candid conversations that count. Picture this. You're at work, doing your job, and one of your male co-workers tries to slut-shame you in front of the whole office by taunting you about how many men he thinks you've slept with. In most workplaces, this would be a sackable offence, but in the Australian Parliament, it's just another day at the office for Green Senator Sarah Hanson Young. Or at least it was, until one memorable day in mid-2018 when Sarah decided she'd had a bloody gutful of the slimy slurs and the back-channeled rumours about her sex life and her character. So she spoke up. And ever since that moment, Sarah has had to defend her reputation as a mother, a politician, and a woman to her colleagues and to the Australian public. Most recently, Sarah has been subject to some pretty vicious attacks on her reputation. She's been bullied, slut-shamed, and she's been attacked online. But she knows that she's not the only one who experiences this. Lots of women get slut-shamed at work. So on behalf of herself and every other woman who can relate, Sarah's decided she's not going to take it anymore. She's written a book called On Guard about the sexism in Australian politics that covers all political parties and all walks of Australian life, really. And today, she joins me to talk about it. I thought I knew what had gone on for you and what went on for women, particularly in Parliament, but there were some things in the book that shocked me. So I wanted to start by just asking you to read the start of the book because it starts in such a powerful way.
Thank you. To be truthful, you must be vulnerable. And to be resilient, you must be aware of your own vulnerabilities. For years, I let slide the sexist slurs and innuendo spoken against me, both inside and outside Parliament, thinking that just staying quiet and not making a fuss would eventually make it stop. I had convinced myself that not giving it oxygen would force it to fade away. I was wrong. As a woman who has a reputation for not being shy about standing up and calling things out, this silence led to a festering conflict inside me. And people say, well, you've been in politics 10 years. Why did it take you so long? And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is it's always hard to admit that something's gotten to you. And especially when it's, they're put downs or things that are undermining you. You don't want to let the bullies know that they're getting to you. But I also had a real sense of responsibility that I didn't want to put other people off politics, particularly women. I think we need more women in politics.
We do.
And so the idea of letting people see behind the curtain just how awful it can be sometimes, I felt that would undermine the call to action. But I've come to the realisation actually that the only way we change this is by getting more women involved, and that means we have to be honest about what it's going to be like.
What made you change your mind? Was it what happened in June 2018?
I think it's a combination of things. The incident with David Leyonhjelm was definitely a key turning point for me where I just had enough.
Can you just talk through that briefly for those people who might have seen bits and pieces, but I'd caught bits and pieces, but to read the way you laid it out in the book was really quite shocking.
So we're obviously both senators. He's a senator for New South Wales.
Who's he a senator for? Like what party is he with?
He's with the party called the Liberal Democrats.
Which sounds perfectly harmless.
It does, but he effectively has a very strong kind of extreme right agenda. He's pro-gun, bunch of other things, and doesn't like it when women stand up and defend themselves, really. So I was in the chamber and we were voting on a motion that had been put up by another senator. It was in the wake of that awful attack on that young comedian in Melbourne where she had been...
Eurydice Dixon.
Yes, and she'd been walking home at night from work and was raped and murdered. And there'd been this massive public outcry. People were just shocked that this could happen. And why aren't we safe as women in our own homes or in our streets or in our workplaces? And so there was a motion that had been put up by another very conservative member, Senator Anning, and he said that in order for women to be safer, we should relax the imports of weapons, tasers and handguns.
So that was a very cynical way to capitalise and take advantage of a tragedy.
Yeah.
And use it to his own political advantage.
Use it to his own political advantage. And thankfully most of the Senate saw it for what it was and rejected it. And there was only 5 members sitting on the side of the chamber. When the vote's called, we all have to swap sides. Everybody voting yes goes on one side and everybody voting no goes on the other side. And I was voting against this motion because I thought it was ridiculous. I mean, the idea of putting more weapons on the streets.
How's that going to make women safer?
Well, it's not. It's not going to make anyone safer.
Like Donald Trump saying the way to stop school shootings is for more people to have guns.
Yeah, exactly. Put them in classrooms. That'll stop shooting in schools. I mean, it's madness. There was only 5 people voting for the motion, and David Leyonhjelm was one of them. The motion went down, of course, because the Labor Party, the Liberal Party, the Greens, we all voted against it. And as it went down, David Leyonhjelm shouted across the chamber, "You'll have to stop shagging men, Sarah."
What?
And as if it was kind of a bullet flying across the chamber, I heard it so clear.
Were you talking at that time?
Not at that time. I had spoken and I had said putting more guns on the street, weapons on the street, will not make women safer. I just don't believe it would.
And the idea is that why is the responsibility and the onus on women to change our behaviour? Why aren't we talking about why aren't men not murdering women?
And it's about the idea that we've got a problem in society.
We do. With violence against women.
With
Absolutely.
violence against women. So we've got to tackle that. Anyway, so he shouts across the chamber and I heard it as clear as a bell. And I thought, why would he say that in this context, and B, he was saying it to put me down.
So his twisted logic was that if you're speaking out against men being violent towards women, you are going to have to – something about your sex life. You're going to have to stop sleeping with them.
Yes, that's right. So I walked over to him because I heard it so clearly, and I went over and I said, "What did you just say to me?" And he said, "Oh, I asked if you were off men yet, Sarah." And I said, "No, you didn't." Frankly, even if you did say that, that's pretty inappropriate in the workplace to a female colleague. And I said, "No, you didn't." And he just smirked at me and he said, "Well, you tell me what I said." And I said, "You told me to stop shagging men." He said, "Yeah, I did." And I just said, I was quite shocked by the brazenness of it. I just said, "Well, you're a creep." And he said, "Fuck off." And so I just stood back up, walked over to my seat, which is about 4 metres away from where he sits.
Yeah.
And I was pretty shaken. And I was shaken not necessarily because of what he said, but because I had just admitted to him, A, that I heard what he said. It upset me. I didn't think it was appropriate. And then when I confronted him about it, he just dismissed me.
Laughed and abused you further.
Laughed and abused me further. So that was the moment that I decided that I needed to do something. I told the leader of my party, spoke to the president about it. David Leyonhjelm was asked to apologise privately over the space of an hour, and he said, "No, not doing it, not apologising." So I felt I had no other option but to put it on the record. And in doing that, while I knew that it would be a bit of a furore, I knew standing up and saying that he'd said these words to me would require people to wonder, well, why is he saying that? Does she sleep with lots of people? What does he mean about, she should stop shagging men? Or, why is she so precious about this?
Or so defensive.
Yeah. But I felt like for me I needed to put it on the record, and all I was asking for was an apology.
Do the same laws or regulations govern the Senate as any other workplace, or is it kind of all bets are off? Can you say whatever you want to people?
So we have this strange thing called parliamentary privilege, which is self-regulation in a way. You can't be sued for defamation for anything that you say in the parliament. You've kind of got this special privilege so that it's meant to be there for a reason, so that members of parliament are not intimidated to do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm. So calling truth to power, I guess.
Truth to power. That is the...
Which is not what this was.
But well, yes. But there's no regulations around how we really have to treat each other. There's no governing of that from the outside. I actually think it's time that we had a code of conduct for those types of things. I think if it's good enough for every other workplace in Australia, it should be good enough for the Australian Parliament, that if you treat your work colleagues badly, if you behave badly, there should be some kind of consequence.
As there is in every other workplace.
As there is. But of course, and for those who have watched the story would understand, and I detail it in the book, David Leyonhjelm then went outside the chamber where he wasn't covered by parliamentary privilege, did TV and radio interviews and doubled down, told people I was well known for having lots of boyfriends, went on a national radio show and told people the name of a man he believes I've had sex with, which I haven't, by the way, but what does that matter? I mean, it was the ultimate slut-shaming.
And what you talk about in the book about the way these similarly middle-aged men were kind of slobbering all over these revelations and interviewing him under the guise of news when it was just a way to talk about a young woman's sex life.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I've struggled with in the 10 years I've been in Parliament. I came in to politics, and when I first met you, Mia, I was much younger than I am now.
We both were.
And I was elected at 25. I was a young woman, opinionated, still very opinionated, by the way. I haven't lost that. And it really wanted to make a difference in the world. I was shocked that in the nation's parliament that one of the most frequent tools used to try and shut me down was sexist slurs and put-downs. Rumours designed to kind of, throw me off my game. Oh, well, she's only saying that because she's sleeping with such and such. I detail it in the book of having male colleagues in the parliament chamber yell out men's names while I'm on my feet that they insinuate I've had sex with.
Oh, my God.
And you just these are nasty, lazy tactics, and they're used in the parliament. But I also know, and this is just my story and my experience, I know that it's not unique. I know there are women across workplaces throughout Australia that know this story is real for them as well. She only got that job because she slept with the boss. Journalists only got that story because, she
slept with a source.
Slept with a source. Women who are put down because of how they dress at work. They wear too much makeup, don't wear enough makeup. They don't dress nice enough. They dress like a slut. It goes on and on and on.
They should wear a bra. They've got their tits out.
Yeah.
Like, when I was reading your book, and I'd never thought of rumours about people's sex lives and who they'd slept with in terms of slut-shaming. I'd always thought about them in terms of rumours. And I've heard rumours about you, and I've heard them about myself in the exact same context as you say. And you're in a really weird position when there are rumours going around about you, because if you deny them, they must be true. And if you don't deny them, they must be true. So
that's right.
I've found myself grappling with the same thing where how do you box against shadows? Like, how do you defend yourself against shadows? And the other thing, by denying something, you then bring it into the public realm and or by even commenting on it, which is what happened with David Leyonhjelm. When you called it out, suddenly he then had something newsworthy to go and talk about with these slobbering, slavish jocks.
And I think that's why it's so powerful as a weapon against women, is they are in and of themselves silencing of the
they
victim.
are.
And it's the slur itself that is the undermining aspect, because the moment you name it or the moment you, don't respond, it must be true, do respond, as you've pointed out.
It's like, she's never denied it, must be true.
And people think, oh, well, how has that played into, what kind of person is she, or, is she actually good at her job? these are things that women right across the country deal with all the time. And when I called out what happened with me, people were shocked, but so many people contacted me and said, oh, it's just like what happened to me at work the other day.
Yeah.
Or women who years and years later have written to me and said, you know, I'm 50 or 60 now and this happened to me when I was 20, and they're still thinking about it. It's really impacted on them. And I'm in an incredibly privileged position. I'm in the nation's parliament. I have an amazing platform to talk about big issues. And I felt, and this is why I really wanted to open the book with that upfront disclosure, I guess, that
of vulnerability.
I had to show some vulnerability if I was to empower myself, but also stand up for other women.
It's really made me, since it happened to me, and it was earlier on in my career, really question how I've been complicit as a woman in passing those rumours on. And I've had people swear to me that such and such slept with such and such. And then I'll go, yeah, but I've had people swear to each other that I slept with such and such and I didn't. So just because someone's really convinced that something happened or that it's a really juicy rumour that would be really fun to believe and scurrilous doesn't mean you should give it any stock, and it certainly doesn't mean you should pass it on.
And I think that's a really interesting thing for women to think about.
Yeah.
But also, you know, there is this balance about being empowered to be who we are. We can wear what we want. We can be friends with whoever we want. We can, you know, take whatever job on that we want. But with all of that comes a responsibility of how we treat others. What is good for you or what is comfortable for you might not be the same for somebody else. But using sexualized slurs and innuendo, it is a type of bullying.
Absolutely.
It is designed to undermine, to intimidate, to cut you off at the knees, to fuck with your head.
Yes. Yes, it really is.
And I think as women we have a responsibility to stand up for each other a bit more too.
In Parliament, I mean, it seems like such an incredibly deconstructed kind of time machine in some ways, in terms of some of the middle-aged men with old school attitudes that are the majority of our elected representatives. How much of it is that there's a certain sort of type of man who just doesn't understand the purpose of a woman? If she's not his wife and he's not sleeping with her, he's just not sure what the point of her is.
Yes. Yeah, I think there is a bit of that. I also think there is it's the boys' club mentality. I don't quite understand how women fit into what is the robust nature of politics. And you know, I called the book On Guard for a reason, and it's called On Guard because there is a rough and tumble, robust nature to politics. And I'm not afraid of that. I love it, actually. And one of the things that confuses some of these guys is I am aggressive in the chamber. I do stand up for myself. I do stand up for those issues. And I've never been afraid of that. But there's a line. And the way our parliament is set up, the distance between the opposition benches and the government benches is exactly 2 swords length. So we've inherited it from the British Parliament. And that's because back in the day, when we decided to have, you know, parliamentary democracy, it was a symbol that we don't fight with violence anymore. We fight battles with words and ideas and policy.
Not innuendo and slut-shaming, please.
Not innuendo and slut-shaming.
Yeah.
And so there's a line. And On Guard is about there is a line. And if you cross it, watch out.
I also like the double meaning that you have to be on guard as a woman.
Yes.
You really have to be watching so many things about the way you dress, the way you speak, the pitch of your voice, That men don't have to expend that energy.
Well, of course, just in recent weeks there's this ridiculous debate over whether a dress that I wore in the chamber was too revealing.
Just when you thought things couldn't deteriorate lower, I was having dinner with 3 female journalists that night, and we were all just so shocked. So The Spectator, which is a conservative online publication edited by Rowan Dean, published an opinion piece by someone showing a dress you were wearing. It was really nice, actually. Where's that dress from?
Leona Edmondson.
Really liked it.
Wonderful Australian. In fact,
beautiful
same.
Australian designer.
Right.
Makes gorgeous dresses, very flattering on women. And it had like a keyhole cut out on your upper chest. Maybe because this is not a visual medium, you couldn't see any cleavage. It was literally just up on your décolletage, I think it's called. And the headline was something about Sarah Hanson Young's credibility gap with like an arrow or something to where your cleavage.
And then my head chopped off. And
head chopped off.
Just my boobs.
Yeah. And it referenced the fact that how can you be expected to be taken seriously when you've got your boobs hanging out? Now, I don't know if the puerile turd that wrote that had ever seen a pair of breasts. Probably not. Probably still living in his mother's basement and hasn't seen a pair of breasts since he was breastfeeding. But how did you feel when you found out about that? One of the women I was having dinner with, I think, called to see if you were okay and you hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it yet, actually. I just couldn't believe it had got to that level, frankly. And just ridiculous. I mean, it's 2018.
Did they apologise to you?
No, they haven't. But I think most people look at that and go, oh, that is just ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. But let me be really clear. This is how women are treated in public life. And we do have a problem with the representation and the treatment of women in politics in particular. It's like this clash of the boys' club nature with women who are standing up for themselves, that we have opinions, and we're not going to be slut-shamed for it, and we're not going to be reduced down to our breasts. I do have breasts.
A few square inches of skin on our chest, on our upper chest.
Yeah, I just, so...
yeah, you do have breasts.
So what?
And long hair and a bunch of other things.
Yeah, that's right. And opinions.
Yeah.
And, the ability to kind of debate. So I think it's lazy. Yeah. It's in line with the other types of sexist put-downs. They're lazy shots at women because some men, not all men, some men can't be bothered even trying to win an argument. They just go for the cheap and nasty.
Julia Banks memorably gave a speech about why she was leaving the Liberal Party to sit on the crossbench as an independent. And she talked about how this culture, not just of slut-shaming, but of treating women with disrespect, bullying and all these things that go on in her own party. And she said the problem is that when good women speak up about the actions of bad men, they often suffer more. And we saw what happened, when David Leyonhjelm then went to town on you. And suddenly your sexual history is up for debate somehow. Have you ever second-guessed yourself about making that public and putting it on the public record?
Yep, all the time. All the time.
I appreciate your honesty for that.
It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
However, I think it's the only way it stops.
Did you have to tell your daughter?
Yes.
Cora's 11
Cora
now?
is 11. Yeah, I did have to tell her. And that's a hard conversation to have.
What did you say?
I said that someone had been saying some pretty mean things and wasn't going to let the bullies win, and we needed to stand up for ourselves. She's a pretty smart and cluey kid, so she kind of did her own research. It was pretty easy to see that it was starting to kind of creep into her daily life as well. At school, she had some of her kids in the classroom ask whether it's true, whether her mum had lots of boyfriends, out of which I said, what did you say, honey? And she said, I said that was a lie. so she, she's prepared to kind of stand up and say what she wants to say too. But I think it's really important for us as mums to have conversations like that with our daughters too. And look, I don't have a son, but I've got a nephew and very close to him, and we also need to think about how we're teaching our young boys in all of this.
100%.
Respect starts at childhood, and we have to keep going on that. You asked the question, do I second guess myself? Yes, I do. But what reminds me that this is the right thing to do, that speaking out and calling it out is the right thing to do, is the response from other people who don't have the same platform, don't have the same ability, is not safe for them to speak up for themselves. And I have a huge sense of respect for them, that they have to carry on their lives without the ability to say no. And if I can say no and make it a bit easier for them, well, that's good. And also decent men out there who have just gone, you know what, we're sick of these other men who carry on like absolute assholes, are giving everyone a bad name. There are many, many decent men out there who are sick and tired of seeing their girlfriends, their wives, their sisters, their daughters disrespected, whether it's in the workplace or, in the public realm. They want the world to be better and safer and more respectful for women too. And one of the things that I've learnt through this is when I called out the David Leyonhjelm stuff, some of the first people who contacted me, as in my colleagues in the parliament, were men. And one guy in particular rang and he said, "Oh, Sarah, I know they've said things about, they've treated you like this for a long time and I didn't really know what to say. I didn't really want to draw attention to it because I didn't know if that would make things worse for you. Really sorry I didn't stand up and say something." I think we also have to think about how we empower men.
Yes. If you see something, say something.
If you see something, say something. Give them a license to be part of calling it out as well.
Because you know who needs to shame the men who do this? Other men. Because they won't be accused of, oh, you just can't handle it. Don't be so precious. Can't you take a joke? Oh, political correctness. It's so much more powerful when a man calls out another man and holds him to account.
And I think it's a really important thing. And hearing directly from male colleagues and friends, they didn't know what to do. We need to give them a license. And, yeah, I'm quite passionate about finding ways to do that now. It hadn't really struck me before that it made them feel as uncomfortable as anyone else, but they felt powerless.
The other thing that's just such an easy and lame rebuttal is when people say, oh, political correctness, no, you can't do anything anymore. You make it clear in your book that there are men who call you babe, there are men who call you Sarah Bear. It's not that any kind of interaction or joking or even sometimes flirting, that's very different from slut-shaming and
sexist
bullying, sexist bullying. You got pregnant just before you came into Parliament, just before you were elected actually. You became a single mother when your daughter was quite small. I don't know if you have a partner at the moment.
No.
But is that part of what these men, clearly they're threatened by you, is that what is so threatening to them? I mean, the fact that they call you a Kardashian, that was the other thing that really jumped out at me, this idea that, oh, if you're a woman and you're not married, therefore you must belong in this other category, which is like sex object.
Yeah, I think...
Do you see the same thing happen to your married colleagues, them being sexualised and slut-shamed in this way?
Not in the same way. And I do think single women, but particularly single mothers, it's easier to say these things about them.
Because you're not protected? Is it that idea that there's no one...
You're not protected, or you're somehow, you're on the hunt. I don't know. No, I'm just a senator. Yeah, I'm just a mum. Right. I'm just doing my job. That's all I care about. I mean, the hilarious thing about David Leyonhjelm's comments was one boyfriend would be nice, Being able to hold down one relationship would be lovely.
And then look at Barnaby Joyce. But in the same year that all this happens, you look at Barnaby Joyce and you talk about, a horrible conversation and interaction that you had with him. You recount that in the book. Can you tell that again?
So my daughter was thrown out of the chamber when she was very little. and
almost physically from the way you describe it.
Yeah, she was like taken from.
She was only 2, and you had to bring her in just at the last minute.
The bells were ringing. She was with me. It was at the end of the day. She was about to fly home to Adelaide, so we were having a bit of a cuddle outside the chamber. And the bells rang. You've only got 4 minutes to get into the chamber, and if you miss the bells, you get locked out. It's very archaic system. Yeah. Anyway, so I just took her in with me. There's no debate when there's a vote. It's basically a head count. You just sit on either side. So I took her in with me, and she was sitting there, and she was just being perfectly behaved.
And you were going to be in there for 2 minutes, right?
Not long. And I was basically going to run straight from that to take her to the car, and she was going to go home with the woman who helped care for her with me. And so we were sitting in the chamber. The president at the time saw her and decided that he would make a point, and so called for her to be removed. He said there was a stranger in the house and she had to be removed. It all kind of happened very fast. The doors were locked. I wasn't sure I didn't quite know what to do. The security guards took her from me. But after the event...
And she was fine.
She was fine.
But you were shaken up.
I was pretty shaken up. But after the event, Barnaby Joyce, who was in the Senate at that time, went out and said that this was all a stunt. Held a press conference. He wasn't even in the chamber, by the way.
He didn't even make it.
He didn't even make it for the vote. He says he was upstairs having a cup of tea. Well, we'll see. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure.
Is that a euphemism, Barnaby?
Maybe.
Now what we know about Barnaby.
So he missed the vote, but he went out and held a press conference, and he said that I was using the Senate as my stage and my child as my prop. And this is after I'd had days of kind of media coverage and public debate about this is why women shouldn't be in the parliament, this is why mums should be home with their kids, and it was awful. And then as we're walking into the chamber one day, he put his hand like across my shoulders and he said, "Oh, no hard feelings." And I shrugged him off and I said, "Yes, hard feelings." I said, "You accused me of using my child." And he said, "Oh, well, I haven't been home for, all year. 7 nights I've had at home, seen my kids." And I just said, "Well, that makes you the bad parent, not me."
Because he'd accused you simultaneously of being a bad senator and a bad mother. And then he somehow was like, "Oh, this is just how it rolls. I haven't seen my kids all year. Don't complain." And... it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And then look what happens to him. And now he's back.
He's got some special job and things. Look, I know. I think the worst – I mean, these are not nice stories, but they are reality. But they're also reality because we have, I believe, a disproportionate number of men versus women in the chamber and in politics.
So it is still like a kind of novelty to have a young unmarried mother. Oh my goodness. That's what I mean about they don't really understand, some of these reconstructed men don't really understand how to deal with you. It's like, are you for having sex or are you with a child, let alone you just being an equal and a colleague worthy of respect. And
I think you put, your finger on it before that there is a difference between, and I did want to make sure I highlighted that in the book about I'm not a prude.
No.
I'm quite – and most women know the difference. In fact, women and men know the difference between friendliness and flirting.
Of course they do.
And creepy, slimy misogynist.
You know the shitty thing about that, though? You can tell the difference
pretty quickly.
And this is where women are just always in such a bind. It's very rare that the opposite of a negative usually the opposite of a negative is a positive, right? But the opposite of slut is prude. So no one wants to be a prude, but no one wants to be considered a slut. So it's kind of like the onus is on us to say, "Oh no, but I'm not a prude, but I'm not a slut, but can't I just be a person? And what business is it of yours?"
Well, but in this context, it's used to undermine and silence and intimidate and to stop us from doing our jobs. I had this wonderful letter sent to me in the midst of when I was writing the book, actually. A woman wrote to me and said that she'd just received a phone call from a colleague that she hadn't seen for 5 years, and that he'd called and he'd said, I've just seen what's happened with Sarah Hanson Young, and I realised that this was happening to you in the office and I hadn't said anything. And he said, I'm sorry. Now, that is change happening before our eyes.
Yep.
And that is what we need.
And that's because of you.
Well, it's because we're calling it out.
Yeah.
It's because we're naming it, and because we're saying, you know what, decent people, men or women, are not going to stand for this anymore.
And this isn't a joke. This isn't just joking around. It's called slut-shaming, and it's a form of bullying.
Yeah. And I think it's important to acknowledge that people may not have recognised these things before in the context that they are. I think some men definitely know what they're doing. They use it very deliberately as weapons and as tools of intimidation. But I think a lot of people have felt uncomfortable but not sure what to do, or just haven't quite understood the context of it and how intimidating and bullying it can be. So hearing that people can change their perception and their mind is what we need. Change doesn't happen because we always thought this, we just didn't want to admit it. It happens because people change their hearts and their minds and their understanding. And only by talking about this, only by having examples raised, are we going to do that. And I really hope that when my daughter is, going to the workplace, that she feels it's a much safer place for her and her friends.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for the work you do. I'm sorry for the shit you've got to put up with, but thank you for speaking up.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for having me, because it's important that we talk about this.
It's crucial that we talk about it, and please keep going.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening to No Filter. I so enjoyed that conversation. You can find On Guard. It's a little book and it's got a fluorescent pink cover. You can't miss it. You'll find it probably near the counter at any good bookstore, or you can go to apple.co/Mamma Mia. That's it for No Filter this year. We are going to have a whole lot of bonus episodes over summer, so be sure to keep your eye on your feed. No Filter is produced, as always, by the magnificent Eliza Ratliff. I'm Mia Friedman. I've so enjoyed all the conversations that I've got to have this year, and I've so enjoyed sharing them with you. And I really have appreciated all your lovely correspondence, your messages to the pod phone, your engagement on my social media pages, and the comments that you've left on Mamma Mia, which is where you can find me anytime at mammamia.com.au.